Welcome back, everyone. Tonight we are diving into a topic that's been debated, discussed, and dissected for centuries, the legacy of Christopher Columbus.
A figure who remains, even after all this time, incredibly polarizing.
Exactly. Was he a hero? A villain? Or, as our sources seem to suggest, somewhere in between those extremes?
That's the question, isn't it? The sources we've got for this deep dive really highlight this tension. They show how Columbus has become this symbolic figure, embodying completely different things depending on who's telling the story.
Yeah. For some, he represents this bold explorer, a symbol of discovery and progress. But then for others, and especially within indigenous communities, he represents the very start of colonization, the upheaval of their worlds.
And it's not just about how he's individually remembered, is it? It goes much deeper than that.
Right. I mean, the sources really emphasize this. It's about this fundamental clash of worldviews, of European expansionism encountering these established and thriving indigenous civilizations.
And these civilizations, as your sources point out, had their own complex social structures, their own belief systems, their own ways of life. They weren't just empty lands waiting to be discovered.
Yeah. So with that in mind, let's actually delve into those initial encounters between Columbus and the indigenous populations he met. The sources paint a pretty fascinating, if somewhat troubling, picture.
I think what's most striking when you read through the accounts, especially from that time period, is this sense of mutual incomprehension. It's like two entirely different worlds colliding, each struggling to make sense of the other.
You see this, I think, most clearly in Columbus's own writings. The excerpts from his journals and letters that we have, they kind of oscillate between wonder and bafflement.
Yeah, you can almost sense him trying to force what he was seeing into his existing European framework of understanding, a framework that simply wasn't equipped to really grasp the complexity of these cultures.
But it wasn't just about observation, was it? There was actual interaction, trade, exchange of goods, even some stories. It's easy to kind of romanticize that initial contact, to see it as this peaceful meeting of cultures.
And to some extent, there was an element of that. New things were introduced to both sides, knowledge was shared, but your sources are very clear this exchange wasn't equal.
Right, there was this darker side to it. Violence, exploitation, and of course the devastating impact of European diseases on populations with no immunity.
And that's a point that your sources really drive home, isn't it? This wasn't just about isolated skirmishes or misunderstandings. The impact of these diseases, coupled with forced labor and the systematic dismantling of their societies, it was catastrophic for the indigenous populations.
Absolutely, and we're not just talking about the past here. The sources make it really clear that the repercussions of these early encounters continue to be felt by indigenous communities today.
Yeah, think about it. The ongoing struggles for land rights, for the recognition of treaties, for cultural preservation, these are all directly linked back to that period of colonization.
It's like these deep wounds that haven't healed, these echoes of historical trauma that still reverberate. But I think it's important also to acknowledge, as your sources do, the resilience of indigenous peoples.
That's such a crucial point. Despite facing centuries of oppression, of attempts to erase their cultures and identities, they've persevered.
Exactly. They've adapted, they've held onto their traditions, and they continue to fight for their rights and recognition. Understanding Columbus's legacy, then, isn't just about recognizing the harm done. It's also about acknowledging this incredible strength and resilience.
Absolutely. And your sources encourage us to go a step further, to really consider the nuances, to move beyond this simple hero or villain framework and grapple with a more complex and ultimately more truthful understanding of history.
And to do that, I think it helps to focus on some specific examples, some pivotal moments that really illustrate the impact of Columbus's actions.
I agree. Would you say there's a particular event that stands out to you from the materials you've gathered?
You know, the account of the destruction of the Taino population in Hispaniola is particularly powerful. It's so tragic. You have this initial period where the Taino, according to the sources, welcomed Columbus and his men. They shared their resources. They were hospitable.
It's almost like this missed opportunity, isn't it? That moment where things could have gone differently.
And yet, as Spanish colonization intensified, things took such a dark turn. Forced labor, brutal violence, disease. The sources are quite explicit about this.
And the result? A demographic collapse and almost complete decimation of the Taino people. It's a stark and brutal reminder of the devastating consequences of colonization.
A reminder that we need to be honest about the past, to acknowledge the human cost of these actions. And to that point, we can't ignore the issue of enslavement. Your sources make it very clear that this was a direct consequence of Columbus's actions and those who followed him.
And on a massive scale, too. Thousands upon thousands of indigenous people captured, forced into horrific conditions, working in mines, on plantations.
And the justifications used at the time, this idea that it was somehow necessary for civilization, it's just appalling to read now. It demonstrates a complete disregard for the basic humanity of the indigenous people.
And think about the wider impact. The social and cultural fabric of these communities was torn apart. Families were separated, traditions were disrupted, languages were suppressed. This wasn't just about physical suffering. It was about the dismantling of entire ways of life.
And the trauma of that experience, as your sources emphasize, continues to affect indigenous communities today. It's this legacy of pain and loss that's still being grappled with.
So we're left with this incredibly complex picture, aren't we? On one hand, the historical record, as detailed in your sources, is filled with examples of violence, exploitation, and cultural destruction directly tied to Columbus and the age of colonization he ushered in.
On the other hand, there's this persistent narrative of him as a hero, a symbol of discovery. How do we reconcile those two?
Well, I think your sources suggest that the key lies in understanding nuance. It's not about erasing history or diminishing the harm that was done, but it's about recognizing the complexity of the man and the historical context in which he operated.
It's about asking difficult questions, about acknowledging the uncomfortable truths, and about approaching this topic with empathy and a willingness to see beyond simplistic narratives.
And I think ultimately that's the core takeaway here. The legacy of Christopher Columbus is messy, it's multifaceted, and it continues to shape our world in profound ways.
And engaging with that legacy honestly and thoughtfully, recognizing the diverse perspectives and experiences involved, that's crucial not just for understanding the past, but also for navigating the present and the future.
It's a process that demands critical thinking, a willingness to listen to different voices, and a recognition that history isn't just a collection of facts and dates, it's about the lived experiences of real people.
And on that note, as we wrap up tonight's deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. As we grapple with the complexities of history, as we confront these uncomfortable truths, how does it shape our understanding of the world we live in today? How does it inform our actions, our choices, our responsibilities moving forward? Something to consider, isn't it?
Absolutely. These aren't just academic questions. They have real-world implications, and each of us has a role to play in this ongoing process of understanding and reconciliation.
Well said. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep listening.